All right, so before I start today, I just wanted to do a quick acknowledgement. I just wanted to acknowledge that we are meeting on Aboriginal land, sovereignty never ceded, and like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging as well. So I've already been introduced. My name's Chelsea Johnson. Email's up on the board. If you do have any questions throughout, please feel free to email me or grab me afterwards, more than happy to. So my name's Chelsea. As I said, I've already survived my first year of teaching, almost. I've only got about 6 more weeks to go. So I'm getting there. I am getting there. Term 1 was really rough. Term 1, and I think Simon said this too, I was averaging about 60 to 70 hours a week, including going home and taking marking on the weekend. So it got to the end of term 1, I crashed, and I went home sobbing to my partner, who picked me back up off the floor and said, "What are you doing? Why are you doing it?" So I want to kind of share with you some of the strategies that helped me in that moment and helped me get to where I am today. The statistics are actually really, really scary. Estimates vary, but between 25 and 40% of beginning teachers actually leave the profession within the first 5 years, which is absolutely heartbreaking. Because I know, just talking with you guys today, that some of you are entering for the right reasons. You do have a huge passion for teaching, and our kids really, really need you in the classroom. So teaching is complex, multifaceted, and probably more challenging than it ever has been before. The current social, economic, and political climate is one which is affected by globalisation, immigration, economic disparities. There's a huge disparity between resources in schools and how we deal with that and those sorts of things. On top of this, we have changes in government policy that are consistently defining, redefining what it means to be a teacher. And then we have those pesky parents who come in and say, "Well, why aren't you doing this?" Or maybe you could teach my kid better this way. Or Johnny really isn't like that at home, so it must be you. So it is here in this plethora of stressful activities that we find beginning teachers trying to navigate the curriculum, trying to work out how they're going to teach these kids, how they're going to deal with parents, and then on top of that they have meetings and they have reporting and all those sorts of things that they've got to work out how to do with very, very little experience doing those things. So researchers have noted that teaching in difficult contexts does cause higher levels of stress. I actually teach in one of those areas myself, so a little bit about me. I'm from Wigan, England, which is a low socioeconomic area in the northwest of England. I've experienced firsthand the apparent effects education can have. I currently teach in Ipswich, which is another low socioeconomic area, and it's an extremely diverse school. So last year, we had 1,668 students. 27% of those were Indigenous or Polynesian. 10% were born overseas, some are refugees. 11% of students have disabilities or require learning support. 25% are approximately single-parent families, 22% are welfare dependent, and 10% are independent students. That means that those students are, 15, 16, 17. They're in charge of themselves, their housing, their finances, their schooling. So they are extremely independent and do need a little bit more support here and there too. I teach 5 English classes. In one class, I have 24 students. 5 are learning support. 5 are Indigenous, 1 is in out-of-home care, 4 are EALD, 5 have a disability, 1 is an independent student, and 1 that I know of comes from a trauma background. We suspect there's another 2 in there, but we just don't have the evidence. Despite all this, I've actually managed to get to almost the end of my first year of teaching. And like I said, it has been a tumultuous journey. It hasn't been easy. So, my first piece of advice, and that comes back to my breakdown that I had at the end of term 1, was that it's important to remind yourself often of why you chose to teach. When my partner scooped me up off the floor quite literally and put me down in front on the couch and said to me, "Why did you do it?" And I told him because I needed to be the teacher that I needed when I was 15 years old. And his reply to me was, "Well, what are you going to do about it? Like, you got to get back up. Off you go." So it's important that you are reminding yourself often of why to teach. And that is my first piece of advice. Because if you lose that and if you don't know why you're teaching, you aren't going to be able to help your students. So, studies have shown that most ECTs enter the profession with positive motivations to teach. So I wanted to take a minute or two now to have you consider what is driving your motivation to teach or to continue to teach. So on that notepad of yours, if you just want to jot down one single sentence, what is it that is driving you to teach or continue teaching? I'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay, so like I said before, don't lose it, come back to it, refer to it often. Put it in a nice, safe place, and when you have those days and when you have grade 8's period 4 on a Thursday or a Friday, look at it again because you're going to need it because times are going to get dark before they get better. So, as I said, I was overworked and exhausted during term 1. Children and teenagers are exhausting, admin and meetings are exhausting, and there is never, ever enough time in a teacher's day. So, one day that stands out in particular to me where I came back to this resilience was a Thursday. And I remember it was a Thursday because I'm one of those lucky ones who has grade 8 period 4 on a Thursday. And on a Thursday, I began my lesson like I always did because these kids, the kids that I teach, really need routine. So we came in, we did some journal writing, we did a quick spelling test, and we got into our things. And it was going really well. I was walking around, I was nailing them with descriptive encouragement. I was like, I really like the way little John started writing straight away. Well done, John. Let's give you some switch points, which is our reward system. So I'm walking around, doing all my parallel acknowledgements, and then a cat walked past. Chaos, absolute chaos. I know you think I'm joking, but I lost a good 50% of that lesson because a cat just happened to walk past. All respectful and responsible behaviour was completely out of the window, and I was stood queuing for their attention for 10 minutes. For 10 minutes, it took them to sit down, be quiet, be ready to learn. And even when they were in their seats and they were listening, they still didn't do a lot of work after that. So, at the end of the day, I was embarrassed and I was angry, not at the cat. The cat didn't know what he was doing. But I was angry at myself. Because in those 10 minutes when I was stood at the classroom, I started to doubt myself and I started to think, well, I'm not a good teacher. Like, it took me 10 minutes to get them back on track. What am I doing wrong? What do I need to do next time? So, I went home, I looked at that piece of paper that you guys just wrote down, and it said, be the teacher that you needed when you were 15 years old. And then Friday came, and I was fine, and I reminded myself of that, and I continued. So, ECTs leave for many reasons. They include high workloads, casualised workforce, so your casual teachers, you're always just saying yes, yes, yes to everything because you need that permanency. You've got challenging student behaviour, high expectations, and there's large amounts of change. Like I said, government is just always redefining and defining what it means to be a teacher and what we do. I know that teaching is an emotionally driven career. I don't think anyone can deny that. It relies on us, the teachers, to build those relationships and rapport with students, some of which can be extremely empowering, some of which can be heartbreaking. We were required to connect with them on a professional and emotional level, and we're not always educators. Depending on the day, we become event planners, negotiators, mediators, and sometimes even zookeepers. Our mind, body, and soul is uncontrollably connected to our work, and this is what makes teaching so great. But it's also very dangerous because it can leave us exhausted. So, as I said before, there's been a huge amount of research conducted into why teachers leave, but I think we need to switch that focus, and I think we need to be looking at resilience. So we need to be looking at what makes teachers stay. What is it that I can do or we can do to make good teachers stay in the classroom, which is where we need them. So we need a shift from attrition to resilience, because resilience is dynamic. We can do stuff with resilience. We can build it. We can foster it. So resilience is a mode of interacting with events in the environment that's activated and nurtured in times of stress. So what that means is that us, the teachers, interact with our environment, the students, the classrooms, admin, other teachers, and we respond to them. And whether we respond to them well, that builds our resilience. If we respond to them negatively, that decreases our resilience. So it's whether we have the capacity to overcome the challenging situations that we will all face at some point in our career. I'm going to draw on some research that was done in 2012 by a group of researchers, and they said 5 things needed to happen for early career teachers to foster resilience. So I want to now discuss these 5 things that are just behind me there, with reference to my own experiences and how I've encountered them and what I've done to help me get through this year, almost. So, going back to the researchers, they've said we need to develop relationships, have a positive school culture, develop a positive teacher identity, understand the nature of teachers' work, and there's something about system policies and procedures, which I'm not going to focus on today. So, obviously, as ECTs, there's only a certain amount of things that we can do. It's unlikely that you're going to be able to actually eventuate change with system policies and procedures unless you are much higher up than just your simple classroom teacher. So I'm going to focus on teachers' work, relationship, and identity. So like I said before, teachers' work is multifaceted, it is ever-changing, and the best thing that I did was accept that. Someone says, can you do this? I say yes, but I just accept that I've got to do it. So that's my second piece of advice. You're entering a complex, intense, and often unpredictable line of work. It's not to say that you should not enter it, you definitely should. But you should accept that things are always changing and develop resilience to overcome them. You are going to have to do things that you did not sign up for, but you're going to do it well. Research has found that ECTs often struggle to cater for diverse learners and manage students' behaviour. And talking to some other teacher friends here, I can see that that's a theme that's often repeated. So this aspect of the work is something that I myself struggle with. I said to you before, I work in Ipswich, and when I tell people that, they always say, oh, how do you do that? That must be so challenging. And I'm like, well, yeah, sometimes. And, you know, grade 8, CAT, I struggled. So first, I recommend that when you're managing challenging behaviour, if you have not already, you look at the essential skills for classroom management, because they will be your absolute Bible, and I still find myself coming back to those now. And then secondly is differentiation, and I'm not just talking about differentiation in the normal sense, like Monique so fantastically spoke about before me. I'm talking about differentiating behavioural strategies as well as pedagogical ones. So behaviour is a form of communication. And this was a revelation to me about 6 months ago, that usually when kids are behaving in certain ways, it's because they're trying to meet their needs. So they're either trying to get something or they're trying to get away from something. So they're either trying to access something or avoid something. And this way of thinking changed my entire teaching practice, because those challenging behaviours, they were no longer that kid just being difficult. They were that kid trying to get or get away from something to meet their own needs. It had a purpose, they were trying to communicate something to me. So I'm going to elucidate that with a little anecdote here. I teach grade 10 English, it's a support class, so they're very, very low. I teach one student, Dom, and he happily contributed to class discussions, but as soon as it came time to write, he would not put pen to paper. Doesn't matter what I did, kept him in detentions, would not ever put pen to paper. And then I went on this PD to do with this whole behaviour as a communication thing, and I realised that Dom was avoiding writing. Any writing task he wouldn't do. So we spoke to him, and he told me that he just can't spell. And he finds it really frustrating when he has to sit down and write and he can't spell. And I was like, okay, cool, I can work with that. Like, yeah, that's what you were communicating to me, but why not writing? I can work with that, I can help you with that. So I taught Dom how to sound words out phonetically, something that he found super useful. And I told him that if you still can't get the spelling or it still looks wrong, you ask me. And I was like, you ask me, you use the strategy, you'll get a reward. So every time he used the strategy, he used to tell me so he could get the reward, every single time. But now though, Dom actually tells me less and less often when he uses the strategy. And he writes most of the time. So by differentiating my behavioural strategies and by expecting different things from that particular student and being able to talk to them meant that I was able to help them and reduce those behaviours that I was finding challenging. So that leads me on, that leads me on to my next one. I can't overstress the importance of relationships, and we all know how important it is to build relationships with students. I wouldn't have been able to do that with Dom unless we had a good relationship already and he felt like he could trust me by telling me he couldn't spell. But I want to really focus on relationships with mentors, friends, and peers as well. So Goldman writes that resonant relationships are like emotional vitamins that sustaining us through tough times and nourishing us daily. So that leads me to my second piece of advice, which is build strong relationships in whatever capacity your school allows you to. As an ECT, I find many relationships beneficial, but I'm going to speak really quickly about mentors because I am cautious of time. So since 2015, all beginning teachers are entitled to a mentor. That's an experienced, high-performing teacher who is able to, or should be able to help you through those initial years of teaching and help you with any challenges that you may face. They're a valuable source of support, and they can help foster your self-esteem, your resilience. And if you are assigned to a school, or if you are in a school right now and you do not know who your mentor is, ask your principal, because you are entitled to one and it's really valuable too. The second relationship that I really want to speak about, and this is where a lot of my strength and resilience comes from, is my peers. Work colleagues are an important source of hope and inspiration in challenging situations, so you should join forces with those who understand your battle. My school, I'm lucky, employs quite a large number of beginning teachers. So we meet fortnightly, rather informally, to discuss strategies relating to the delivery of the curriculum, management, anything really that we need to speak about. We provide emotional support, help with reflection, problem solving, and share resources. And it is in some of those meetings that I've had my biggest breakthroughs and my breakdowns. All I know is that I would not have made it here in front of you without some of the people in here today, and also those people at my school who are willing to help me through that. Really quickly though, on that, before I forget, studies have found that surrounding yourself with colleagues with a positive outlook can be contagious. So if you surround yourself with happy people, you're going to feel happy. The opposite also applies though, and I think that's really important to mention. I found myself at the start of the year being involved in a lot of negative staff room talk about students, about parents and those sorts of things. Avoid it. Like it leads to disillusionment. You start to feel bad when you come to work and you start to blame externalities rather than things that you can actually control and focus on. Okay, finally, forming a positive teacher identity is necessary for being a resilient teacher. Identity, like resilience, is dynamic and it will change over time, but we need to understand that identity is socially produced and dependent on what happens in our classroom and outside our classroom too. So to develop that positive teacher identity, we must accept that they're socially produced in and at school and in and out of the classroom. I've learned, however, this year that my positive teacher identity is most at risk when I'm in the classroom, usually dealing with challenging behaviour. For example, another little anecdote. Last term, when I politely asked Kim to remove her headphones in my classroom, I was met with a sigh and an eye roll. Kim is a 15-year-old Year 10 girl. Kim did comply and she did remove her headphones, but as soon as I walked away, she turned to a friend and she muttered, "She's such a stupid B word." The next day, hang on, it gets better. The next day, a different student uttered the same comment to a friend because I wouldn't let her go for a drink 5 minutes into my lesson. If I were to take these comments personally, they would have felt like an attack. So this is my next piece of advice. When something like that happens to you, and it will, don't take it personally, because that negatively affects your teacher identity and it negatively affects that relationship with that student. If I was to react instinctively, because I was a little bit offended, I would have reacted probably poorly. Instead, I reminded myself that those two students were just saving face in front of their friends. I'd said no or asked them to do something that lowers their reputation amongst their friend group. So I stepped away, took a few deep breaths, reminded myself of that, and realised that I was the adult in the room and I had to behave appropriately and respond appropriately instead. So, when you are dealing with challenging behaviour, there's no magic wand or silver bullet. If I'd found one, I reckon I would have had a Nobel Peace Prize by now. But I've found that it helps to take a deep breath, remind yourself to respond, don't react. That is my mantra. When I can feel myself getting angry or getting frustrated or something like that, I remove myself from the situation, repeat that to myself 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 times, however many times it takes. And I respond, I don't react instinctively. And you only should address the situation when you're calm and you're collected too. Because addressing a situation when you are escalated and the student is escalated is never, ever going to end well. Both for your identity and the relationships. Hang on a sec, yeah. So finally then, in sum, I want to just say that resilience is key or vital to you as you enter or continue your careers in your initial years of teaching. And to thrive instead of simply survive, you should put your own mental well-being first, because you cannot pour from an empty cup and you cannot help the students unless you are well. These are 5 things that work for me, and these are 5 things that I hope might work for you too. So number 1, remind yourself often of why you chose to teach. look at that piece of paper that you wrote, probably write it more neatly on a prettier piece of paper somewhere if you're going to keep it. Accept and embrace the ever-changing nature of the profession you're entering. It's great. Thank you all for becoming teachers. And 3, differentiate pedagogical as well as behavioural strategies. 4, build strong relationships with mentors, peers and students. And 5, respond, don't react. Don't take things personally, because for your kids it's not personal. They just see you as the epitome of school and they don't want to be there. And that is everything from me. So thank you. Lindsay, did you have a question?
Yeah. In that specific example you gave about him, what did you give a response, a verbal response at that time, or did you just walk away and didn't hear a comment?
Yeah, look, I walked away for a little bit. I was quite upset at the comment. The second time it happened, not so much. I was able to just be like, you need to go wait outside for me, thank you, and remove the student from the situation. Then I finished giving my instruction and I kind of dealt with that. The first one caught me by surprise, though, and I was quite upset and shocked. So I walked away, gave myself 10 minutes, and I walked back and I was like, hey, I heard you say that. And I was like, you know in this school that we behave respectfully towards each other and towards teachers, and I don't think that was very respectful. And I was like, so I'm going to report that to the necessary blah, 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 blah. And that student actually apologised to me. So yeah, it did get dealt with. It's not to say that they don't receive the consequence. They definitely do. But that they get that in an appropriate manner at an appropriate time. Yeah.
And one more was, do you think mentors should be within your faculty or removed from?
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting question. The school that I'm at actually is currently next year, they're aligning the mentors with the mentees per faculty. So an English mentor will mentor an English beginning teacher. I personally think that that's the way it should be. I feel like with an English mentor, I probably would have got a lot more out of the experience, and they would be able to help me with curriculum stuff as well as just the behavioural processes as well. Yeah, thank you. That's all right. Oh, thank you. Awesome.